What's up, Squadron 7? Welcome back to another video, our first ever of the DYAD Explains. We have, videos of us reacting to news, but this time we are going to be explaining to you guys as lore keepers and lore masters of Star Wars knowledge. And in this episode, we're going to explain what are midichlorians. Initial definition that we run into, just based off of, common sense, is that they are tiny microbiotic cells within the body that enable someone to be force sensitive. This leads to a lot of misconceptions about the force. Typically, that the more you have, the more powerful you are. Thus, this leads to people like having a table of like the amounts of midichlorians certain characters have. And then that's their arbitrary kind of ranking as to who beats who, right? So if Anakin has over 20,000 midichlorians, it's off the charts, as Qui-Gon says. That means he can, statically beat Palpatine, Yoda, and every single other Force user in the galaxy based on that. Do you have any other, Choco, any other, misconceptions that you'd want to kind of...
No. I mean, you're right. You're right on the money that it's not, it does not equate power levels, and you kind of need to dig down into what it is. Like if you look at Anakin having over 20,000 when he was a child, could Anakin beat Palpatine? No, that'd be stupid. So obviously there's more to it than just that, but yeah, we're gonna dive deep into it and kind of suss out what it actually means. Canonically speaking, Anakin is the only person who we know roughly how many midichlorians.
Yeah,
that's it. Anakin, 20,000. That's it. No one else has ever been named in any canon source ever.
Do we know where those numbers came from? Or were they just headcanons? Like somebody released a website and they said, "Oh, Yoda has 17,500."
I don't know where they came from. I mean, I know at some point George Lucas had an internal power ranking when he was writing the original trilogy, and there's some of these that come from semi-obscure places, but again, none of them are canon. We know, for instance, when George Lucas started writing the original trilogy, that Han Solo was a big green alien, and Chewbacca looked like a Lasat.
And so the first source that we're going to cite today to help you guys understand midichlorians comes from the Star Wars book by Zare, Hidalgo, and Horton. And it is as follows. A force-sensitive individual is able to tap into the force and learns its will due to midichlorians, microscopic intelligent life forms that communicate the will of the force. They reside within the cells of all living organisms and form a symbiotic relationship with their hosts. Without midichlorians, life would not exist and the universe would have no knowledge of the force. They are a gateway to knowledge of the force, and through their spiritual connection to the host, create an organic imprint on the individual that can be identified through a blood test. The higher the midichlorian count, the more prevalent the extraordinary abilities a force user can wield. And so, going off of that explanation in this reference book, it seems to me that in the most simplest terms, midichlorians are microbiotic organisms that are within us that allow people to listen to the force and to speak to the force and hear its will. And there's one kind of caveat that I do want to throw out there, and that this usually leads to someone saying, "Oh, so there is no free will." There is. The force has a will of its own. Everybody has a will of their own. It all depends on the user or the force user that's hearing the will to interpret it, to act on it, and to deliver. So when we're talking about, prophecies and people hearing the will of the force being the desire to be in balance, it all depends on what the user does with that information to, act on that will. So someone could hear, "Oh, I want to be in balance from the force." And then someone could be Palpatine and be like, "Oh, so I must rule the galaxy." And that's what they're going to choose to do.
I mean, that's the best way to put it, because like you just said, the Sith are capable of listening to the will of the Force. They just don't.
Yeah.
They wield it like a tool, like a blunt instrument, and impose their own will on the Force. They look at it the other way around. So yeah, it does not mean that there's no free will or anything like that. Like some people can hear the call more clearly than others. And again, a huge misconception. I didn't think about this until just now. I should have said this when you asked me originally, but the Force is not a superpower that someone has. It is not internal. I do not. When someone does a Force push, it's not wind coming from my hands, right? It is entreating the Force, which is external, to do something for me. And the midichlorians really just constitute how clearly we're able to communicate.
Absolutely. And it goes into, how the Jedi perceive or the Jedi use this saying to kind of summon up or muster up their courage to do things. I am one with the Force. The Force is with me. The Force is with me, not I have the Force. Let me use the Force. And as you said, the Sith...
That's not how the Force works.
And as you said, the Sith, definitely, they dominate the Force, and they bend it, and that's what throws it in disarray. And if you would like a video on the DYAD Explains balance in the Force, we would absolutely do it, so leave your comments in the comment section below.
That's how the DYAD started.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we could do it in a shorter form.
Absolutely. And then I know that you had another source that you wanted to cite.
Yeah. I just pulled up one of my favorite. It's Secrets of the Jedi. We are very soon getting a Secrets of the Sith book. It might be out by the time you're watching it, so check it out. But this book is Luke. This is like notes from Luke while he's on Octo. And he says, during the time of the Galactic Republic, the Jedi used science to explain why some of us feel the Force more strongly than others. Prospective younglings were tested by the Jedi Order for midichlorians, microscopic life forms that reside in all living cells and impart the will of the Force to their hosts. Those with a higher number of midichlorians were able to hear the will of the Force more clearly than others. Personally, I've never been one to worry about how exactly the Force whispers to me. All that matters is that it still does. And I love that sentiment because there's a big complaint when the prequels came out amongst prequel haters specifically that midichlorians demystified the Force.
Yeah.
It was a blood test to find out how powerful you were. But it's not. It's like a mini window. You are not able to communicate with the Force directly, but the midichlorians can, and you can communicate to them, right? So if you can imagine having one midichlorian is like a little tiny window. The Force may not hear you reaching out if you just have one. Also, is that little tiny window, is it all the way open? Is it partially open? Is it cracked? Is it closed? The amount of midichlorians you have is the amount of windows you have. But you can still train and meditate and learn how to open those windows more so you can communicate more clearly.
And that'll bring me to this other misconception that I want to kind of debunk. And it comes from the Star Wars book. It is written as such where you could have that misconception. The higher the midichlorian count, the more prevalent the extraordinary abilities a Force user can wield. Yes. It's all about potential, and I do want to bring up this source right here. That is analogous to what Darth Choco was talking about, and it comes from Rise of Kylo Ren when Vo is having a hard time accepting that Ben is so much stronger, but she works just as hard, and you can see here, this is why is Ben so much stronger. I work just as hard as he does. This is Rise of Kylo Ren issue 3. And, this is an awesome explanation from Luke himself. Ben isn't stronger, Vo. That's not how it works. The Force can be a trickle, a stream, a river, a flood, for anyone who can sense it. So think of yourself as a door, as Choco said, a window. The wider you open, the more easily the force flows through you. Some people just start out with their door a bit more open, but any door can open wide. And so when you're thinking about that, just think that the higher your midichlorian count, the more potential you have outright. But if you're force sensitive, you can train to open your door widely. And that's why, like, you know, I go back to Revenge of the Sith with Obi-Wan and Anakin. Anakin, at that point, before he lost half of his limbs, was nearing, like, the height of his potential. But Obi-Wan still defeated him. And there are a number of factors here to consider. You know, Anakin being cocky and arrogant and being blinded by the dark side. And Obi-Wan, you know, just being overall more experienced in combat. But essentially, this doesn't, like, if you're just basing things on midichlorians, you would assume that Obi-Wan was really, really weak compared to someone who was off the charts.
Absolutely. I mean, Obi-Wan wasn't the most powerful, and Obi-Wan got chosen to become a Padawan much later than others, and he spent a lot more time as a Padawan. You know, he had to work really hard to open those doors wide. The other thing is, regardless of how wide those doors were opened, there's still way more factors at play here. So yeah, you can't look at it directly like, oh, you know, it doesn't stack like that, you know. And I think when it comes to verses, this is the reason I don't do a lot of versus content, because truthfully, it's more of a tier list with good and bad matchups between specific people. Where you could get defeated by someone that's an earlier tier because it's just a favorable matchup for them. But anyone who's on the same tier has a chance of beating anyone else.
And that's a great analog, because for a lot of people in the versus community, they really do like to look at static levels of power. But in all of the history of fighting games, it's always been tier lists. And then you'd have really great players beating people who are using S tier characters, but the player is that much better and more experienced, and there are several factors leading to them losing, even though they're using an S tier character. So it is a great kind of point to bring out, you know.
Yeah, in Super Smash Brothers, I play as Rob, and he's not very highly ranked, but I'll make you cry.
I mean, in Street Fighter terms, I've always used Ken. I know Ken was S tier in Third Strike, but in 5, he's nowhere close to S tier. But I'll beat some S tier characters with Ken, guaranteed. Especially if you're a worse player than me. That's
but
obvious.
By the same token, this is still me playing Rob. Rosalina just wrecks my kit. Garbage character. Moveset just wrecks my kit. And you're like, oh my god. Yeah, it's not static. It's not linear. The really important thing is that they impart the will of the Force. Mm-hmm. Yes, there is free will, but you know, sometimes, you know, the Force will stand up and slap you. You know, sometimes the Force needs something to happen, and it's almost like a plus something to whatever role you're doing. It's not going to work automatically. It doesn't mean you don't have to try. You still have to roll, but it'll augment your rolls for sure.
In like D&D or stats terms or attributes terms, it really did kind of work that way in KOTOR as well, because some people would invest in charisma and persuasion. And you would have a person that could theoretically mind trick a lot of people. And then you would have people who just invested in combat, and they couldn't convince somebody to, like, you know, to brush their hair. Our final explanation, or our final interpretation of midichlorians, if you are still confused, is that they are tiny microbiotic life forms that live within people, that enable them to hear the will of the Force, and it enables them to access abilities that the Force enables them to do. And so the more you have, the more open your access to the Force is, and then the less you have, you just kind of have to work your way up to opening yourself more and more to the Force, and that is what midichlorians are. You don't win every single fight if you have more of them.
It's your bandwidth. If you're pulling 200 meg down or 500 meg down or a gig down, that's an advantage. It means that you can do things that other people can't. Doesn't mean you'll win. No, it's just less of a barrier, you know? And that's your communication with the Force. It's your bandwidth. That's all it is.
And with that, that'll do it for our explanation of what are midichlorians. Guys, if you enjoyed our video or if you learned something new, please don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel, to Darth Choco's channel. We're doing all kinds of videos and Star Wars videos and content of this nature. So yeah, his
and watch-alongs. Come watch movies and hang out with us, you know?
Absolutely. And you can find his Twitter over here by his little name, and all of the rest of his info on the bottom below. But as always, a huge thank you and shout out to channel members Squadron 7, without which could not continue to make content. But that is the end. On to the next one.
For light and for life.
We are all the Republic.
And may the Force be with you always.